Welcome back to a new episode of our revisiting series. Last time we were in Belgrade with the fantastic Lana Bastasic, and this time we're going to Sarajevo, and we will be joined by the wonderful poet Nikola Madžirov. Nikola, hello, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you for the invitation.
So I'm really pleased and honored that we can present one of your essays as well as another text you wrote in Sarajevo. So you were in Sarajevo in the summer of last year. So maybe you, just to kick things off, you want to say a little bit about that, about the residency, when it happened and under what circumstances.
Yeah, first of all, Sarajevo residency was my first trip after 2 years, I would say, of abstinence because of situation with COVID and somehow of my personal wish to be alone outside of the borders of my, let's say, insecurity. But then I felt that I need another kind of solitude outside of my home. And Sarajevo brought me this silence, brought me these translucent borders that I needed so much in order to recognize myself in a distant space. And somehow walking through the streets along the river of Miljacka, also traveling through time. It was my first trip to Sarajevo after, I would say, maybe 10 years, many years. And first trip after, and the second trip after my excursion as in 1991, before the war started in Yugoslavia. So in a way, Sarajevo into my eyes when I was 18 years old, before I was recruited in the army, and Sarajevo now, after all these personal and world wars around us, was kind of completely different, I would say, sight, but in the way the same city, because I consider city as a kind of construction of feelings, construction of people's destiny, construction of people's stories. And this warmth that I felt in 1991 was still there. The only thing I could feel between, as a distance, let's say, to measure this time distance, was the sorrow, but I would say maybe the sorrow inside myself. And in that way, when you have this as a kind of measure for understanding the world, you can also discover it outside of yourself. But again, I would say this kind of feeling of recognizing myself into other spots, different spots of the city, was what brought home inside me, being in Sarajevo.
I really like what you said here about that you needed solitude, but solitude in a different place, which I think sometimes is what people really need, that you seek solitude or to be for yourself, but you also need to be physically somewhere else to discover, let's say, a new side of you, of a new part of you in a sort of way. So I really enjoyed what you just said there. There's also a funny kind of like encounter in your essay you talk about with the director Wim Wenders. And you talk about how he writes, or what he said about making films, that he actually starts with a place, like on the horizon, he just sees a site, and from there he then starts excavating, and it is the place that then gives him the story. So do you want to elaborate on that, or if maybe you had something else to say about that, or what you discovered with him, or what you think about his idea?
Yeah, I agree with Wenders, whom I met during the Sarajevo Film Festival that was taking place in August last year. He was talking about places, about sites, about cities. Even, of course, remember the $1 million hotel, about the hotel as a site, as a micro world. And once you find this site, then the story comes out. You start digging with attention and with of an archaeologist that is about to find something very delicate. Then your tools become much smaller. I always think that when the story, it's opposite, when the story becomes bigger, then your tools and you yourself become much smaller. And that way you disappear, you dissolve inside the story. And the site is the starting point. Very often we find ourselves like in front of amphitheater, Roman amphitheater, or I don't know, in front of some ruined wall. We find ourselves there. We see our shadow there, but in fact, this shadow could be a portal into another time. And again, I would say that the trigger is the space. The trigger is this spot, our presence there. And the story comes out when we dissolve with all the objects. We have to find the secret language of the objects around us. We have to dig into the relations between our presence there, our footsteps, and of course the story of the place we are occupying at the moment. Because I believe in this vertical and horizontal time, I think that the personal time is exactly on the spot where those two different times meet. And once we exclude ourselves, we erase ourselves of this exclusivity of creation, and we put ourselves into the position of discovering or rediscovering, let's say, because I think the stories are like undiscovered minerals in mines. We know that they exist somewhere, but all we have to do is to face them and to bring them on the surface without destroying them, without even, I think there's in Japan, there's a technique that even the object becomes, the value to objects becomes even bigger if you find a way how to fix all these fragments into one. Even when you destroy it, there's a still chance.
I think you mean kintsugi, the art
exactly,
of
yes.
putting pottery back together.
Exactly. Like, also, I think the writer, and in general, it's to put these fragments together. And the moment when you see this kind of objects behind the glass in the museum or somewhere outside, you forget about the one that did it. You just think, who was the one that either created this piece or broke it? And this is the beauty of being an observer in distant spaces.
I like the fact that you kind of like intertwine space and time. Actually, time is also quite important in your essay as well as in the letter that we have published on the website. Actually, something in your essay as well as in your letter when you talk about clocks in the cities, but also clocks in a room, actually reminded me of a story by Cortázar, which is like instructions on how to wind up a watch. And I don't know, it was just a weird thing where it's like, oh, Cortázar, and there's something about, the passing of time that I think, I don't know, there's something in your text that reminded me of that. I really
Thank you so much. Yeah, I was always obsessed by these clocks on the streets, to find them. Mostly they're not working, and I was obsessed to see what is the time when they stop working. you know, there's a clock, of course, but it's left in Skopje when the earthquake happened in Skopje in 1963. You know, the old railway station, the clock stopped exactly when the earthquake happened, and it shows the time of the earthquake. There's a story in a way that kind of this mechanism, blocked mechanism, in fact, it shows us that time works, that time goes on. And I want to find out what's behind, to find out the stories that all the clocks that stopped working. Remember, there was a clock also in Bergman, Wild Strawberries, the film, The Dream. There was appeared a clock, and then we see all these clocks in Graz, for example, on the top, on the hill, the clock that I know that the hand clock that shows the minutes is shorter than the hand clock that shows the hours.
Yeah, the Turm in Graz, yeah.
Exactly. So each kind of a clock, and even when I was a child, when I will see a clock that was measuring like by, I was never focused on time. I was always focused on the mechanism and why it has to go even when we close our eyes, even when we stop breathing, why time is in front of us. This obsession with time helped me to start exploring clocks in the cities where I go, and also to explore the relation between the wrinkles on our face and the rust in this mechanism. Is there why when one child is born also at the same time, the clock doesn't, the time doesn't react as we react? Why when someone dies, the clock doesn't stop? In a way, it helps me to collect all these small stories and put them in, not in linear time, as we talked before. And Sarajevo is full with this kind of moments. Even the river, for me, was seeing the river is the most, for me, the most important clock in this city, because I know it will never stop. I know, it will be always different. I know that even when river can kill someone, the body will not stop there. It's always in dynamics. This is what I want from literature. This is what I want from life when I try to explore. Even when I go deep into foundation of things, when I went into my old house when I grew up, I wanted to dig to see what's there inside, because I heard a story that my grandfather put a bottle with a message inside. I want to find out this kind of message, even knowing that maybe it's rooted, that time ate this sentence. But still in my mind, there is something that I can reconstruct by knowing his life.
Talking about time, there's also, because we are publishing your essay, but we are also publishing actually a letter that you wrote during your time in Sarajevo to the writer Monique Schwitter, and then it got published in Manuskripte, and you can tell us a little bit more about that later. But what struck me when reading the letter is the harrowing and just almost shocking synchronicity, because already in the second line of the letter you talk about war and the bodies in the river. And reading this now, there was just harrowing synchronicity that almost jolted me like to the bone. So, but maybe first you want to say something about these letters that you sent from Sarajevo.
Yes, it was idea of Monique Schwitter, who proposed this letter, this literature correspondence. In fact, I had it first with Jan Wagner. We supposed to have with Monique Schwitter, but now we did it. What I liked about this correspondence was because we agreed to send letters at the same time. So we didn't know what we were writing about in a way. We had some kind of idea. And in a way, we broke this kind of certainty. In the old times when people were writing letters, they thought that only one person can read this letter, or maybe two, maybe let's say the postman, or maybe the wind will take it away and someone will just tear apart and put it in the garbage. But that's it. Now we write letters completely aware that many people read, but we want to address one person. And this gives the burden of the let's say, of the light on you when you sit in a bench for the first time with your first love. That you think that everybody is watching you at the moment and you want to say something very important, something personal. That's why we decided to write this letter at the same time in a way to avoid this kind of distance that in fact doesn't exist when we send electronic letters, because they will never pale, they will never be burned. They can be easily erased, but there is some trace of them somewhere. In that way, it was interesting because we start writing about similar things. And one of the things was that we were writing about the movements of people leaving. And one that I don't know, I had this image of a river that is in the Atlas, the river Atlas. It's so kind of peaceful because I have seen rivers in wars, how they look like, how they change their structure, how they change in a way the history. There are many battles that we remember by naming the river where they happened, unfortunately. But fortunately, there are also rivers that we remember by uniting cultures, by uniting stories, uniting a very, very personal and intimate time. When I was in Paris, I remember when they were cleaning the canal. They clean it, I don't remember, but after some years they clean, and I found so many objects. I found so many lives inside. There were bicycles, someone threw bicycles, some washing machines. You can see everything there. And I was always astonished by what is there on the bottom of this river, because we don't have an image that there is something static, that we always think that this river has to go somewhere. This river always comes from somewhere. We don't think about the river that we are watching at the moment. But now the war came back to us, and we remember the cities now, unfortunately, the cities, the rivers. We remember the mountains according to the massacres or to where the worst things happen in life. Many people try to change it by giving another context after war ends. But again, I would say there's no need for this to understand that war cannot really change anything on better. We remember the war in Yugoslavia, and now it happens again. I'm in touch with Ukrainian poets. I translated 9 of them, and I published them in Macedonian. Now will be published in one of the oldest magazines, Stremež, in Macedonian language. I was in touch with Yuri Andrukhovych, with Ostap Slyvynsky, with many other Ukrainian poets. And while writing, I feel helpless. I don't know how to react except to try to spread their voice, as well as the river trying to spread the message. When I was a child, very often I was doing this, putting a boat, writing a message in a small paper boat, and then running after it. That's how I feel myself now as a child, that is running after the words written by these poets, words of understanding and on words that can, in a way, stop the killing and bring trust again in humanity. I don't want to think to sound very pathetic, because I always think that literature, in a way, doesn't give messages. It registers as a, but I always think that poetry has to be witness of what happened, because the official histories care about something else. They're more about numbers. They're more about different power. Poetry is more about fragility. I still remember when we talk about wars, for example, I don't think much about who was the winner or who was the loser, but I always think about the poem that was in the pocket of Miklós Radnóti, who was found dead. Or I'm thinking about Apollinaire writing from hidden deep in the ground while they were shooting around him. And this kind of voice is stronger and maybe is silent, more silent than the sound of the bullet, but it travels much, much longer through time. And I tried with this translation of the Ukrainian poets just to spread the voice here in Macedonia.
I think, yeah, I think that's wonderful, and also important work that we all somehow do, even if at the end we feel helpless in many ways. I don't really want to say too much else about the essay. I think it would be probably nicer for the people to read it and not take too much away from it, unless you want maybe to add something to it, or otherwise I think those were nice closing words, talking about how the voices of poets can carry longer in time.
Thank you. I can read, maybe, if you like, just in English, maybe the final line of the essay, and then people will continue
on the road.
Yes.
Okay.
Sarajevo, August 2021. I wasn't writing, I was breathing. I wanted to witness a new awakening, to pass between two empty containers so I could witness the emptiness of all beginnings. Sarajevo was my first trip, with the new scars on my lungs, which I felt like newly drawn maps of cities near the seas, colored with traces of boats which arrive and depart. As small children on the beaches, we built cities of sand, and those cities had no names nor streets, but still we dreamed of living in them. Of those cities, nothing remains. All I have are the words of my grandmother, who told me that a rolling stone gathers no moss. As I was falling asleep, I felt as if my whole body was being wrapped in moss, and the war was sleeping.
Thank you so much, Nikola. So for everyone watching, the essay as well as the letter are now online. You can find the link in the description box. And if you enjoy what we're doing, you can simply subscribe to our channel or follow us on social media, or to keep abreast with news, just go to our website, traduki.eu. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you again, Nikola, and I'll see you next time.